Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Saturday night stream, live stream, where we're going to do some live reading and just kind of hang out. Hopefully you guys are having a pretty good weekend. Put on a little bit of chapstick here. Helps me enunciate. Hello everyone, Brandon, Blondie, Cindy, Karen, everyone out there lurking, everybody. It's good to see you guys. Let's see, what have we got to talk about tonight? Everybody that's been hyping and liking the posts, much appreciated. I don't know what it does, but I'm sure it's getting it in front of more eyes, so that's always nice. If you are planning to join us for our Halloween story contest, everything's open now. I put a post up about it earlier. Just make sure you read all the rules, 1,000 to 5,000 words. Make sure it's YouTube appropriate. Make sure it's Halloween themed. And make sure you get it in before October 15th. I left an email address in the post on the community tab, so I can't wait to see what you guys have got. Darn, I was hoping that Leia would be here. She said she had a good one to submit. I'm waiting patiently for everybody's entries. Hopefully we'll get a bunch of them. I'd love to have some new stories for the our Halloween Spooktacular that I've been working on. I've been hard at it, working on a few new stories, and I think we're going to have an exciting Halloween series, maybe, around Stragview, concerning some things, one of which we're going to talk about tonight. Our Friday story this week is a Stragview story, and things are definitely starting to happen at old Stragview. Oh no, she might miss us. Well, she'll have to catch us later, I guess. I know she'll be upset about that, but she's been popping in on the daytime live streams too, so that's always nice. But, per usual, we've got 5 cool stories. Let me find our first one here. I think our Monday story is going to be the end of part 3 in our Black Site 12 story. They just finished all of their midterms, so now we're going to get to the teacher debriefing, and then probably in the next couple of months we'll start part 4 so that we can roll right along with the kids at the Black Site. Wednesday is going to be our usual Cashmere thing. Friday is going to be a Stragview story, and then I've got the next 2 parts on our Memories by Mail series that we've been reading lately. So that should be a lot of fun. Let me get some things set up here, and we will get rolling with some live reads. So, as said, for our first one, we're going to get our Black Site story for the week. We're in part 3, which is our midterm series. The kids are just finishing up their midterm. So now we go to the last chapter in part 3, which is debriefing, where the teachers talk to Security Chief Ridley about what they may have learned from the midterms. And away we go. So, what did we learn today? Hang on. Make sure I'm not crackling or anything. So, what did we... Before we get rolling, let me turn that fan down. I'm always afraid that it's going to come on over the audio. At least put it on low, I guess. It's pretty unmuggy in here. I guess we could probably turn it all the way down. Don't mind my sweatpants. I'm getting comfier. All right. So, what did we learn today? Security Chief Ridley looked around at the assembled adults. Cutter was there in his red uniform, along with Dr. Hammershoal, Miss Cashmere, and several other minders who had overseen today's procedures. No one seemed to want to talk about it, but Security Chief Ridley wasn't quite as angry as he was putting on. Quite the contrary, he was excited. He had never seen a year so full of powerful students. It was interesting to see how the talents evolved over the years, and this bunch would have been a great test group for new abilities. If any of them were going to live long enough to be tested, they would have been a great scientific value to someone. Unfortunately, that wasn't the purpose of the kindergarten. Come, don't be shy. Let's hear what you've gathered from this year's midterms. I'm live streaming. Go. That's Carter. Say hi to Carter, everyone.
Hello.
Go on, Carter. I'm recording.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Back to the show.
Back to the show. That's right. Say bye-bye. Okay. I'll see you later. That's my little homunculus. Isn't he cute? Okay, where were we? Let's see. Let's try that last part again. Okie dokie. Back to the show. Hey, Osiris. He's a cutie. Let's see. Okay. Let's hear what you've gathered from this year's round of midterms. Seeing that no one was going to bite the bullet, Cutter decided to get it over with and stepped forward. Red Bands did very well this year. All students saw marked improvement, I believe. He wet his lips as he charged forward. I believe I might have a graduation candidate this year. Ridley leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as he looked at Cutter appraisingly. Wow, it's been a while since we've had a Red Band graduate. Keep me posted on this student. Which one is it, by chance? Ryan Coswell, the kid from Maine. He's got a real pistol in there. Let's just hope he doesn't turn it on us. What about the others? Well, Dexter and Dick continue to show great progress. The other two are okay, but not overly impressive. I believe the other two will wash out before finals. Wade Forger will likely go before the end of the month. The kids are getting buggy, and I can see Chelsea Kang starting to crack as well. If Ryan doesn't burn out, I suspect he will graduate after finals. If he does, I don't think the other two will qualify, but both of them will make excellent snatchers or minders, especially Dexter. Ridley nodded. Thank you for your assessment, Cutter. Miss Cashmere, how were the blue bands this year? Cutter backed away, hands behind his back, and Miss Cashmere stepped forward with a swish of her skirts and a knowing smile. The blue bands are thriving. All of our students managed to complete the midterm, though there was an incident involving Miss Sanderson. Change something there. There we go. An incident? Miss Lloyd said suddenly. I heard that little creature scrambled someone's brain. She was all mean-tempered smiles as the older woman looked away in embarrassment, but when Ridley looked at her, she suddenly found it prudent to be quiet. "Miss Lloyd, we do not interrupt when others are talking. Please be silent until called upon. Now, Miss Cashmere, why don't you tell us a little about Masha and her incident?" Masha is an accomplished telepath. She both sends and receives well, and I suspect she might have other latent talents. "Do you have any data for this?" Ripley asked, raising an eyebrow. "Well, no, but just the fact that she can do both is quite rare. It's possible that she might have abilities seen in the green band room, or even the red, given time and training." "We don't have time, Mrs. Cashmere. We train them, and then we graduate them. Nothing more." "Will she graduate?" The woman, who always looked a lot like someone's grandmother to the security chief, nodded with assurance. "Oh, yes. She'll graduate. She shows no sign of burnout, and she only grows stronger day by day." "Keep an eye on her, Mrs. Cashmere. If she gets too powerful, she'll be transferred to one of the special classes. I hear we have an opening," he said, looking at Cutter without much amusement. Cutter scuffed his foot, never liking the man's attention or his cold eyes. "Last but not least," try that one again. I probably have to silence my phone. Rookie mistake. Forgot to silence my phone. Okay. That's where we're at. Figured it was my dad. He usually calls about this time. "Last but not least," Security Chief Ridley said, "let's hear about our green bands." Miss Lloyd started to step forward, but a clearing of throat from the little doctor sent her moving back into line. For a man who was barely 4 feet, he could command respect like a giant. He waddled forward, looking less than pleased to be here, and cleared his throat again, which always reminded Ridley of a chipmunk sneezing. "Green band class has been overrun with new students this year, and there is a lot of talent on display. Gerald Frazier is a gifted guide, and properly executed the course, despite the addition of Cindy Moe. Dunstan continues to show improvement, as does Rebecca Daniels, who may have discovered an ability for astral projection or clairvoyance. We aren't sure. Mark has also performed admirably as a tracker, and Emily, Dr. Hammershoal," Ridley said through gritted teeth, "I don't much care how much you love these kids. I need to know if you have graduation candidates or not." Dr. Hammershoal blew out a breath and straightened his coat. "Well, any of them would be fine candidates, but Dunstan or Gerald would be the 2 standouts. However, I'd like to speak with you privately about—" "Yes, yes," Ridley said dismissively. "I'm sure you would. Miss Gladys, what about Cindy?" Miss Gladys stepped forward, covering the little doctor's escape as he returned to the others. "Cindy is powerful, but still naive. I don't know how much good she will be. Given her upbringing, she thinks this is all a gift from God or something. She will likely graduate, but I would recommend not telling her. There is a chance that she might thwart her own graduation attempt, and that could be bad." Ridley nodded, looking through the folders on his desk before dismissing them. They all left, glad to be gone, but Dr. Hammershoal snuck around. "Yeah. Try that one again. Dr. Hammarskjöld stuck around. He was standing as straight as he could manage, scuffing his boots occasionally as Ridley looked over the reviews. They had only lost one this midterm. Not bad at all. A midterm where they didn't lose half the class was a rare thing, but it seemed like the pool might be thinning itself out before long. Surely, this display of power would create some infighting, and Ridley had little doubt they would... The dwarf cleared his throat, and Ridley looked up, annoyed. "What is it, Nathan?" I wanted to discuss the Blue Band group with you, sir." Ridley smirked. Sir? When was the last time the little doctor had called him sir? He must want something pretty badly to remember his manners. "What's to discuss, Hammarskjöld? You know why they're here, and what will become of them in the end. They will either wash out or graduate, and it's a toss-up, which is worse in my opinion. That's why I'm trying to offer you a third option, if you'll let me. With Mark, Dunstan, and Rebecca, I could really make a difference, something this institution hasn't done in a long time. Why, with just the cases closed by Dunstan, Let's get one thing straight, Nathan. I don't give a good goddamn what you think these kids are capable of. I could care less how many cases are closed or missing persons are found. The black site is here for one purpose, and one purpose only. You know what it is, just like I do. But you know it's possible to leave these children with more than a little of their powers. He fumbled with his words. You did it for me. Ridley snorted and shook his head. You are an anomaly, a freak, Nathan, and I don't claim to have any sort of knowledge, one way or another, on whether you fully washed out or not. What I do know is that if you keep talking, I'm going to have Cutter take you to the juicing room and let them strip whatever dribble of power you still have. Now, if you want to keep what talent remains to you, I would suggest that you never bring it up again. Are we clear? Yes, but as for your request, it is denied. We don't use any of these kids for anything but graduates. They're meat for the machine, Nathan. You know that. If their meat isn't tender, then they wash out. And God help them if they do. I don't have to tell you what it's like to Yeah. If I could talk today. We're listening to our Black Site story, by the way, if you're just joining us. Shoot. What it's like to walk amongst the mortals when you've had a taste of godhood, do I? Nathan didn't say anything. He turned to go, but as Ridley went back to his work, he did toss one last thing over his shoulder. Think of the good you could be doing. Think of the merit this place... Oh, no, wait, that's Dr. Hammarskjöld. I need to squeak your voice for that. Think of the good you could be doing. Think of the merits this place could achieve if we simply let it starve. Ridley snorted, casting a barb of his own at the dwarf's back. Nathan, if that thing ever gets out, even your dribble will be the sweetest nectar to him. Instead of testing me, you should thank these children. Their graduation is what the world depends on. Without graduates, how would we keep it from sucking this world dry? Hell of a way to treat our future, Hammarskjöld whispered, but Ridley heard. Children are our future, Hammarskjöld, he said, hiking his feet up on his desk and reaching for a folder. These kids are far more than that. They are its salvation, its sacrifice. Ominous stuff, but that is our Blacksite story, our Monday story this week. So, let me dig through here a little bit. I have us a Kashmir story. Let's see. I've had to just start saving them in a Grammarly folder. There's a lot of Halloween stories I'm working on. All right, so let's move on with our Kashmir story. Let's see. Okay, yeah. For those of you who recall, we've been following the blossoming love thing, the blossoming romance between Earl and Candace, the owner of the thrift store. And she invited Earl out on a date last week, so we're going to see how that's going. Hopefully well. I like Earl. He's a good guy. You guys are quiet tonight. Goodness. Usually you guys are all over the place. Let's see. This one is called Dinner with Miss Blair. So, I hope you guys enjoy it. Hey, guys, are we on a date tonight? Earl didn't say anything, afraid to jinx it. He had agreed to come out with Candace, but he knew that the second he said it was a date, she would correct him, and he would know that he'd been mistaken. They'd gone to Miss Blair's, one of the better places in town, to go get a bite, and when he walked through the door, he had known that it would come up. "We are," Candace said. She took hold of his arm and smiled at him, as Earl looked down at her with a pleased sense of confusion. He hadn't hoped that he'd been right about their intentions, but now that he was sure he was even more pleased to be out with her. Miss Blair's wasn't as busy as it usually was, only a handful of patrons sitting around and talking quietly, but it was still, hands down, one of the best places for dinner in Kashmir. Well, this might be the story for you then, Blondie. Not to spoil it or anything. All right. Being seen here would make them official, and Earl felt like he might simply die of relief at being here with such a beautiful woman on an actual date. Well, look at you, Earl. I didn't think I'd ever seen you in... Blech. I don't think I've ever seen you in here with a date. She smiled at Candace, but the woman thought there might be something curious and a little mean just beneath the surface. Since it's your first time, darling, welcome to Miss Blair's. I'm Miss Blair, and I'll have your food out in just a minute. They sat down in a booth near the back, and Candace smirked as she went through the menu. It's weird. I don't think I've ever seen a place where they just already know what you want before you get here. It's kind of their thing. When you come here, they automatically know what you want, and it saves you having to go through the menu and stuff, you know? Miss Blair came back about 5 minutes later with their drinks and their meals. She set a steak with home fries and broccoli down in front of Earl, and a pair of chops with asparagus and green beans in front of Candace. Earl raised an eyebrow when he saw the pork chops, thinking they looked a little bit underdone. Candace, however, looked like she might start salivating onto the table as she picked up her fork and prepared to dig in. Miss Blair, far be it for me to question your cooking, but those chops look a little on the pink side. Miss Blair gave him a withering look. Earl, you've been coming here for a long time. You know how the restaurant works. I just serve the food. I don't question the orders. Earl put his hand up as if to say he didn't mean any harm and began eating his steak as Candace dug into the pork chops. Or, goodness, Grammarly. Apparently, Earl sounds like or now. There we go. Earl saw that he had been right. He wasn't even sure those pork chops had touched a grill. They were extremely rare, and he could see the blood leaking down her face as she enjoyed them. That didn't seem to stop her. Quite the contrary. She was wolfing them down like someone might try to take them from her. And it wasn't until the meat was gone that she seemed to notice. The vegetables... Bah. Weird commas in places. Try that one again. And it wasn't until the meat was gone that she seemed to notice the vegetables even existed. She looked up at Earl before she dug into her asparagus, almost laughing as she looked at his half-eaten steak. Is there something on my face? Earl shook his head. No, I just never met a gal with an appetite like yours, I guess. She looked a little self-conscious, and he... Okay. Earl shook his head quickly, as if trying to take it back. No, I didn't mean anything by it. It's nice to find someone who shares my love of rare meat, he said, as he continued to eat his steak. There we go. Well, sleep tight, Brandon. Hopefully we can help you into a more restful state. Let's see. Right, Candace said as she dug into her vegetables. Rare. Rare? No, that would have insinuated that the meat had touched the flame. What Candace had eaten was essentially raw. She didn't tell Earl this, as she was afraid it would scare him off. Truth be told, Candace had a secret that she really wasn't in a big hurry to share with him, but it was likely one that would come up soon enough. She supposed the gravekeeper probably had his own secrets. Everyone in this town seemed to, but she wanted to hang on to hers a while longer. She had told people too quickly before, and it usually was around the time she left town for good. So, how long have you lived in town? Oh. There we go. Had to decipher something there. Earl thought about it as he chewed over his broccoli. It sounds weird to say, but I don't rightly know. Very few of us who just show up here do. We just. Show up here. There we go. Try that one again. Very few of us who. Oh, one of these days I'm going to figure out what makes that reverb so I can fix it. Very few of us who just show up here do. We just exist here one day. We get off the bus and, well, here we are. I don't know. That's probably not how it works in other towns, but in Kashmir it just seems pretty normal. I love Grammarly, but it puts weird spaces and things in places. Okay. Candace laughed. Did none of you think of taking a car here? Earl chuckled. Earl chuckled. Wondered about that. A lot of people who were here don't seem to know how they got here either. One day they were someplace else, maybe taking a bus to visit a family member or to start a job somewhere else, and then suddenly they're here. It's an odd thing. Most of them also don't remember what they were doing before they got here either. I think I might have been going to see my mother, but I can't be sure. I don't think I was happy where I was, he said, before reaching for his sweet tea. What makes you say that? Candace asked, around a mouthful of green beans. Well, most of us swap stories once we get here. Most of us. What we can remember of our past lives, at least, and a lot of us seem like we weren't particularly happy where we were. That seems to be the only thing. If you're just joining us, we're reading our Kashmir story for the week. So Earl and Candace are on a date, so it's a pretty good one. That seems to be the only through line. Seems like the people who come here are looking for something that they can't really find in the place where they're at. Maybe that's how the town gets a hold of us, you know? Maybe we were just looking for somewhere else to go. Candace thought about that as she chewed. She supposed it had been the same with her. She hadn't really been happy where she was, and when her aunt had invited her to live with her, she had nearly jumped at the chance. Excuse me. Her aunt had always talked about the town like it was something special. And Candace... What? Oh. Okay. And Candace had been excited to go see it. No. And Candace had been excited to go see if it lived up to all the hype. So far, it had, but she wasn't sure what she would do if she suddenly felt like she wanted to leave. She knew from experience that no one ever really left the town once they got here, and most people didn't think they could. Kashmir was kind of a trap that was easy to fall into, but once you were here, it was harder to get out. What about you? How long have you been a resident of America's strangest little town? Earl asked. Oh, about a year, I guess. My aunt invited me here to help her with her business, and I guess I was looking for a new place to be. I was bored where I was, not really living up to my potential, and the thought of starting over in a new place appealed to me. I miss it sometimes. Not a lot, but, as well as I do that one. As well as I do that one. Okay, I see what it is. Sorry, guys, a lot of technicals tonight. I miss it sometimes. Not a lot. There we go. Not a lot, but you know as well as I do that once you're here, it's hard to leave again. Earl chuckled. Most people who get here never even try. Something about this place is soothing to them, and they like the community and the people enough to make a life here. That's how it worked for me, at least. I may have never made it to my mom's house, but I did find a home. Uh-oh. Is my mic out? It says I'm recording. Kind of technicals that we got on your end, Blondie. Mine's on Grammarly's end. Sorry. It keeps putting weird exclamations in places, and it's throwing me off. I don't know. I'm weird about exclamations and stuff. Candace found that sweet in its own way. There was a lot more to Earl than simply the man that kept the graveyard, and she was starting to see that. They had nearly finished their meal when Miss Blair came and put down a couple of plates on the table. The one she put in front of Earl had apple pie, but the one she put down in front of Candace was like nothing she had ever smelled. It was definitely some sort of meat pie. Of that she was certain, but she didn't think she wanted to know what sort of meat was in it. The smell reminded her of times gone by, and a couple of those times were times she wasn't terribly proud of. Did you order dessert? Earl teased. I didn't, but it smells amazing, Candace said, as she looked up at Miss Blair with appreciation. To her surprise, Miss Blair did not return the look. She didn't seem to approve of Candace the way she had when they first walked in, and Candace wondered what she had done to earn the ire of the older woman. To her knowledge, this was their first meeting, and she hadn't said more than a couple of words to her. Perhaps the woman was fond of Earl, and the idea of him dating some woman from out of town didn't sit right with her. There was more to luck than that, though. What? Oh, there was more to the look. I swear. Strange word choices. There was more to the look than that, though. It was as if Miss Blair could smell something on the woman, and she didn't seem to like it. The pie, however, more than made up for the sour look. It was indeed a meat pie, and it was something she hadn't tasted since her grandmother died. It was so rich and flavorful that she began to wonder how the woman had acquired the particular ingredients to make it. Most people would have shied away from this sort of meat, but she had baked her a pie out of it, despite her clear mistrust. Perhaps there was more to Miss Blair than met the eye, but Candace knew this would not be the time to ask. Earl picked up the check when it arrived, and Candace left a few bills on the table. As they left, Earl thanked Miss Blair for her hospitality, but when Candace attempted to do this... But when Candace attempted to do the same, the woman only nodded sourly at her. They had gotten to the parking lot when Candace realized she'd forgotten her purse at the table. Sir, you'll have to wait. That's coming up. Not in this one, but it'll be in the next one. We'll get to learn Candace's secret in the next Cashmere story. Earl offered to go get it for her, but Candace said that she would go get it herself. She'd gone back and found it sitting in the front, next to the proprietor, and as Miss Blair handed it back to her, she kept a firm hand on the other end as she delivered a whispered warning. "Don't you hurt him. That man is very precious to us, and if anything happens to him, we'll know who to blame. The town always knows who to blame when things like this happen." Candace looked at her very distressfully before assuring her that she would never hurt Earl. "I'd rather die than do him harm. I think I might love him, but it's really too soon to say." That made the old woman smile a little, but it was icy. "Just make sure that you're somewhere safe before the full moon. I don't want anything to happen to him, or anyone else in this town." Candace was a little bit surprised, but she nodded and told the woman that she would. She rejoined Earl in the parking lot, and the two of them decided to stroll back to her apartment so he could make sure she got home safely. As they walked, Candace wondered if she ought to tell him the truth before someone else did, and decided tonight might be the night for some honesty. Alrighty, that's our Cashmere story. Ooh, a lot of stuff happening tonight. Oh, story's really getting good over there. We're definitely gonna have some. We're definitely gonna have some Cashmere stories over Halloween. But I think we might continue this particular storyline into the Halloween season. That way, we don't have to hold it over till later. Let's see, what next? I think we'll do our Stragview story next. Let's see, where did I put that? It's somewhere around here. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so we've read, if you'll remember, our last Stragview story was called The Calm Before, and this one's called The Storm. So, a lot of things happening in old Stragview, so I'm glad you guys are here to hear all about it. So, let's get this one cracking. It all happened because Derek, Officer Huffstler, was late. It wasn't due to anything but good old bad luck, though that wouldn't stop many of them from grousing about it. The captain was one such individual, and Derek had been even later because he had to listen to him complain about it. It hadn't been something that he could have done anything about. He had been riding to work in his old pickup truck when a sudden bang had sent him skidding off the side of the road. Luckily, it had been a back tire, so it hadn't been too bad. He would have been about 30 minutes early, but when it was all said and done, he was 15 minutes late, and he had missed the briefing. He had called control so they could let the captain know, but by the look on his face, there had been no such message. "I expect you to be at briefing, Hustler. That's why we have a briefing." There we go. "I like to let my staff know what they're looking forward to each night before they come in. If you don't think that's If you don't think that's something you're going to be able to do, then by all means, I guess I can find someone who can." My apologies, Captain. I had a flat tire But Captain Worthy waved him off. "I'm not interested in whatever excuse you have for oversleeping. Don't let it happen again, or I'll find someone that can get here on time. Do we understand?" "Yes, sir," Derek said, internally thinking to himself that he'd be sure to plan out his next flat tire so that it was a little more convenient for the captain. "Well, thank you, Karen." Trying to fix a couple of things while I go. "Now, despite your lateness, Sergeant Mobley has asked that you be placed in confinement tonight. I don't know how you impressed him, but he's asked for you specifically. Have you ever worked with Sergeant Mobley before?" "No, I had never even met him until the other night." The captain raised an eyebrow. "Well, he seems to have taken a shine to you. I would suggest that you be very careful about what you tell him and take everything he says with a grain of salt. Mobley has been here for about 30 years, but he spent the last 28 of those years on the warden's shit list." Sorry. There we go. Okay. "I don't know what he did to get there, and quite frankly, I don't want to know. All I'm telling you is that if you intend to have a career here, then I would watch yourself very carefully, and be careful what you let him talk to you." Can't talk tonight. "What you let him talk you into. You can go now. They're already waiting for you." If I was the fastest, I'd already be done. Okay. Derek headed off to G-Dorm, which was confinement. It sat behind a large, locked gate, and it was as uninviting. It was as uninviting as one could expect. Derek supposed it was supposed to be, but it was pretty formidable even when you were supposed to be there. He had he had to go through the gate. One of the yard sergeants unlocked it for him when he started hearing a noise from the officer station. It was something high-pitched and unpleasant, and the sergeant had cocked his head up, trying to hear it better. "Sounds like somebody's having a bad time," he said with a little chuckle. "Better get used to that. It's pretty much an all-day, every-day kind of thing." Derek rolled his eyes as he stepped inside, but as he got closer to the door, he couldn't help but notice that the screaming was getting louder. It wasn't coming from the floor like the sergeant had expected. The screaming was coming from the officer station. Derek put on a burst of speed as he headed for the post, not quite sure what to expect. He came to the front door to find an officer he was unfamiliar with, trying to comfort Sergeant Mobley, who was on the floor and staring at someone sitting in a chair where he usually sat. Stop this. One. It was one, not wanna. One look at the guy made it pretty clear what Mobley's problem was. If Derek had come into a place and found someone like that, he would probably have lost his mind as well. The guy was clearly in a uniform, what was left of it at least, and he was awash with blood. He wasn't translucent. It wasn't like he was an apparition or anything, but he was somewhere between a zombie and a ghost. His body had been ripped apart, but it didn't seem to be hampering him as he went about his paperwork. He was leaving nothing behind either, so Derek wasn't sure what to make of any of this. Oh, damn it, stop. There we go. Ugh. Butt's falling asleep. Let me readjust here some. Alright. "It can't be," Mobley kept mumbling again and again. "It can't be. It can't be. It just can't be." "Sarge, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on?" Mobley just went right on repeating the same thing again and again, and Derek realized he was going to have no option but to call the captain and fill him in on what was going on. He looked at the other officer, he thought his name might be Daly, and asked him if he had called the captain's office yet. "Are you kidding me? I'm not going anywhere near that thing. I don't even know what it is, and it seems to be freaking Sarge out a lot. No, I'll stand right here until somebody comes in. I gotta keep this old guy from hurting himself." Derek looked at the apparition, and as he began stepping towards him, he wasn't really sure what was going to happen. If the ghost in the chair saw him, then he made no indication. He just kept doing paperwork, his pen scritching on the page, and when Derek reached for the phone, it was as if the thing had never even seen him. He dialed the captain's office, keeping a wary eye on the operation as he did so. "Don't tell me there's trouble already," the captain said as he picked up the phone. "Sir, you might want to come down here. Something's up with Sergeant Mobley." The captain sighed. Clearly, this wasn't the first time he'd had to deal with something like this. If he's trying to use sick days, then he needs to go through the proper channels like everybody else. He knows that. I'm not... No, sir. He's having a fit or something. There's something weird down here. Something that was here when we got here. And it seems to be upsetting him a lot. The captain growled, and Derek could hear him sit forward in his chair. "All right, but this better be good." If you're just joining us, we're reading our Stragview story for the week. And I am fixing Grammarly mistakes, which I guess is like most of my work these days. Derek didn't know if it was good or not, but the captain seemed impressed when he arrived. Derek didn't know what he was expecting, but it clearly wasn't what he found. He looked at the apparition as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing for a moment. "That can't be," the captain said. "What the hell is this?" "I don't know, sir. He was here when we got here, and Sergeant Mobley appears to be having a pretty bad time." "Yeah. Well, seeing something like that, I don't imagine he is." "What do we do?" The captain shook his head. "Not much we can do. We're going to have to..." But he was cut off as someone pushed the call button from out in the hall. I glanced out into the quad, not sure who would be pushing the quad button since we were all in here. Did it swap? It did. Why don't I'm just going to have to write in Google Docs, I guess. This is getting ridiculous. I glanced at... Swap me from third person to first person. There. Derek glanced out at the quad, not sure who would be pushing the quad button since they were all in here. And what he found was another of the ghostly people. This one was a stocky fellow, most of his face missing, and he was pushing the button like he wanted to take a nice long sit down before his next duties took him somewhere else. There was another ghostly guard beside him, this one a reedy man with half his skull looking to be smashed in by something. The two of them just stood there like they weren't a couple of ghouls trying to gain entry to a secure housing unit. And the captain was absolutely speechless. "Leave them out there," he said, as he glanced at the ghost before stepping over to the phone. "I gotta call this in." Derek didn't know who he was calling, but whoever was on the other end did not seem particularly pleased about being bothered. The captain told him what was going on, his usual crisis gone, his usual crispness. His usual crispness gone, as he was scolded by whoever was on the other end of the line. The two of them talked, and after about a minute, the captain thanked him and hung up the phone. "Hustler, have you ever met the warden?" Derek shuddered. It was all the affirmation the captain needed. "Good. Then I shouldn't have to introduce you." Derek had only met the warden of Stragview once, and it had been an ill-advised trip to the laundry room. It had been after an It had been after his ill-advised trip to the laundry room. He had honestly hoped to go the rest of his career without having to be in the same room as the man ever again, but it seemed it wasn't to be. He was shaking a little at the thought of having to face the man again, and when somebody hit the call button on the outside of the confinement door, they all looked to see the meticulously kept warden standing outside. They buzzed him in, and he came striding in as if heads were about to roll. "All right, what's all the trouble? I swear, Captain, if you can't handle the shift, then I'll find somebody who—" He stopped as he saw the ghostly apparition. Derek had never heard of the captain being caught off guard. What? Of the warden being caught off guard, but it appeared to be just what was happening. He stared at the man sitting in front of the computer, as if he was the last person he had ever expected to see. Clearly, this was not what the warden had expected to find, and it was the last thing he'd expected to be called down to handle. "Sorry to disturb you, Warden, but when a ghost appears in the officer station, it seems like it might be a good idea to have you come down and have a look." The warden just went right on staring at the man who was doing paperwork in front of the computer, and when he stepped towards him, Derek thought he might be getting ready to shake the guy and ask what the hell he thought he was doing. Instead, he picked up the phone and waited impatiently as it rang 3 times. Whoever was on the other end had a soft, feminine voice, and it did very little to dissuade the warden in his anger. "I need you to come meet me in my office in 5 minutes so you can explain to me what the hell is going on in confinement." He hung up without giving them a chance to answer, before turning to the confinement team with what he must have hoped was a winning smile. "Nothing to worry about. All this is going to be sorted out very soon. Go about business as usual now, but I would advise you not to—" When Mobley stood up suddenly and grabbed him, it made everybody jump a little. Mobley had gone from being nearly catatonic to furious in the scope of about 5 seconds. He pushed the warden against the console as he wrapped his hands around his throat, shaking him as he yelled into his face, "I wouldn't have told you such a thing was possible." God dang it, really? Derek wouldn't have said such a thing was possible. He had never actually seen anyone try to accost the warden, but it seemed he was only allowed to do so because he had caught the man so fully off his guard. "You son of a bitch! You goddamn son of a bitch! How could you do such a thing? They were my friends, and now you've done this to them. If I had the strength in my body to do so, I'd kill you right now. It's what you deserve. It's what you—" But that was about the time the warden's surprise wore off. He raised his hands and knocked Mobley's shaky fingers loose with the greatest of ease. He pushed the man back, and now it was Mobley's turn to hit the console hard enough to make it rattle. He stared at him with a look of such intense hatred that I felt a little embarrassed to be witnessing it. The warden's eyes were so callous and full of disdain that it seemed like a man ought to burst into flames as he stood if he stood under it for too long. Ah, shit. Well, no way this one's getting monetized. Oh my goodness. Go back to the cool. Doot, 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 doot. Apparently, there's some static on here. Let's see if that's any better. Okay, I think we got it. No more than the usual amount of static there. Probably going to have to re-record that one. Anyway, I'll finish out the story. I'll re-record this one later. Let's see. He raised his hands and knocked Mobley's shaky fingers loose with the greatest of ease. He pushed the man back, and now it was Mobley's turn to hit the console, hard enough to make it rattle. He stared at him with a look of such intense hatred that Derek felt a little embarrassed to be witnessing it. The warden's eyes were so callous and full of disdain that it seemed like a man ought to burst into flames if he stood under it for too long. Captain Worthy, I want this man escorted out of the prison. He is suspended indefinitely for assault on staff. Inform him that if he ever steps foot on the premises again, he will be arrested and likely end up in federal prison. Before the captain had taken his first step towards the sergeant, the warden stepped in close and delivered a declaration of his own. And if I ever see you again, you won't have to worry about going to prison. I'll put you in the ground myself. He walked out then, and Captain Worthy was left with nothing else to do but place Sergeant Mobley under indefinite suspension and walk him off the compound. Officer Daly and Derek were left standing in the officer station with the busily typing entity, neither of them sure what to do after that. Ugh. All right. Do something a little sneaky here. We'll just put it back together later. Make sure that there's no more... Yeah, scratching seems to be gone. Okay. I swear, every time. I want a full explanation about why that thing is in the officer station. Miss Evergreen smiled at the warden as she adjusted her skirts. I do apologize, Warden. It appears there was a mix-up in the scheduling. It appear... Eh. I was certain you told me you wanted the new staff ready by the 21st. The warden gritted his teeth and drummed his fingers on the table. No, I said the 1st of October. This isn't how I expected this to go. Now we have angry staff who know what we plan to do. This isn't good. If they decide to ask questions, it's going to lead to a lot of awkward talk. Miss Evergreen shrugged. It was bound to happen eventually. They were going to find out. This just means we can push forward. We can go ahead and get the new officers in the dorms by tomorrow. If that's what you want, she added hastily. The warden looked shocked. Could they be ready by tomorrow? Miss Evergreen smiled icily. They could be ready right now, if you wanted them to be. The warden's smile matched hers perfectly. Then let's go ahead and do it tonight. Miss Evergreen looked like she might start to giggle. Tonight? Are you absolutely sure? Why not? The warden said, as he spread his hands wide across the tabletop. If we can be fully staffed right this minute, then why shouldn't we? Let's go ahead and get it all underway so that they can go ahead and complain about it and be done with it. Calls to the captain's office began about an hour before master roster count. The calls were all the same, too. People coming into their dorms, strange people, all of them silent, all of them hard-working. They were coming in and doing the jobs the officers had done until a few minutes before. They were scaring the inmates, they were causing an uproar, and all of them wanted to know why this was happening. The captain didn't know. The captain had heard nothing about this, and when he called the warden told him to assemble his crew under the tower, and that he would address them. The captain wasn't sure how this was going to shake out, and as he called his crew and told them to be under the captain's tower for an assembly, they all asked the same question. Should we just abandon our dorms? The captain answered the questions in the same way the warden had. They aren't abandoned. We're fully staffed now, and will be for the foreseeable future. The small group of regular people who still worked for Stragview assembled under the warden's tower, and he came out like some kind of emperor to address them and their growing concerns. Assistant Warden Strauss was with him, as was Miss Evergreen, and the two of them sat on either side of him, as if they were there to guide or to tempt him. Miss Evergreen was all smiles as she looked down at the assembled people, but Assistant Warden Strauss looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. As for the warden, you could have seen his smile from a mile away. Thank you for coming to this meeting. I understand that many of you have concerns about the new staff. Let me assure you, none of you will be fired to make room for them. They will work here, just as we do, and they will probably work even harder than we do. I have discovered a means to create a workforce in the face of our staff shortage, and you are now seeing the fruits of that labor. I know there will be some growing pains, some transitions, but rest assured they're not dangerous, and they mean you no harm. They serve Stragview, just as you do, and they're here to help us. What are they? Someone yelled, and the warden couldn't be sure who it was in the poor lighting. It would have probably been Mobley if he hadn't gotten rid of that old man right off. As many of you know, Stragview has a long and often bloody history. These new recruits are the spirits, the byproduct of that history. They are the unfortunate aftermath of such a history as ours. But, as I said, they will offer you no harm, and should not be feared or treated any differently than you would treat anyone else. Are they ghosts? Someone else yelled. The warden started to answer, but Miss Evergreen put a hand on his shoulder and stepped forward. They are. Many of them have been here for decades, and they only wish to help. They do not wish anyone ill will. They only want to be of service. Many of them are people that you've known. Many of them are people that you once worked with. They do not want to do you any harm. They only want to serve. And what if we choose not to work with them? Someone else asked. That was Officer Hustler. The warden was sure of it. The boy had shaken off a lot of the fear and trepidation that he'd had when he'd seen him in the dorm, and the look on his face was now something he didn't much care for. It looked an awful lot like defiance, and Stragview had never been a place for defiance. And why would you choose such a thing? I saw the way Sergeant Mobley looked at them. He was afraid. He knew them. And it isn't right what you're doing here. This isn't something that we should condone. This isn't something that anyone should condone. We need to... But the warden cut him off before he could get going. What you need to do is return to your post if you continue being paid. Look around you. We don't need you anymore. I have filled every shift overnight. and your continued presence here is not overly necessary. These apparitions do not eat, they do not sleep, and they do not complain ceaselessly about benefits or pay increases or birthdays or funerals or any of the other myriad things that I have to field on a daily basis. Those who will not work with our new workforce will be replaced, and quickly. Before you walk out, I would think very hard about your decision. Before you stay, Officer Hustler said, I'd think very hard about what's going on here. Look around you. What's to stop him from putting us to work if he doesn't think we're working hard enough? We've seen what he does. We've seen him make other people disappear. What's to stop him from making us go away so that our corpses can work harder for him? I, for one, don't need to pay bills that badly. I'll go find work elsewhere. The warden rolled his eyes as Officer Hustler started walking towards the front gate. But when others began to join him, it was a little more serious. It wasn't just a few, either. At first, it was half of those assembled, then a third. Before long, even Captain Worthy was leaving. He knew it would be the same with the other shifts. Half of those assembled. The fuck? It repeated it on me. Some of them would stay, but it wouldn't be many. He thought perhaps 90% of them would leave in the end, and he supposed he should have expected that. Officer Hustler had been right to expect him to ratchet up the workload. Anyone who fell from now on would join... would join the workload. Would join the workforce, whether they wanted to or not. But he had enough workers to work 8 different shifts. He hadn't been lying when he said he didn't need them anymore, and now it was up to them to realize that. This is getting out of hand, Assistant Warden Strauss said as they went back into the tower. Who is going to man the shift if everyone leaves? The same people who are manning it now, Miss Evergreen said. This is not a setback. This is what we wanted. Now we don't have to pay any of them. We don't have to feed anyone except the inmates, and any of them who get out of line will quickly find out how potent our new workforce is. They do not tire. They do not sleep. They do not complain, and they do not eat. We can utilize them indefinitely and cut the budget of Stragview into pieces. Yours will be the most efficient prison in the country, and soon others will wish to know how we do these things. Assistant Warden Strauss turned to the warden, trying one more desperate ploy. Sir, you have to stop them. Tell them we'll transition. Tell them we'll integrate them slowly. We need real people here, too. We need the outside world to see that we're still of benefit to the community. If the town finds out that we fired everyone, how is that going to look? Oof, I need a drink. Hang on. Ugh. The warden mulled that over for a moment, but it didn't seem to have the weight that Strauss had clearly hoped it would. So long as the inmates are being taken care of, I don't see what anyone has to be upset about. We're doing the job we were put here to do. I think that's all the public really cares about in the end. Strauss looked over at Miss Evergreen and seemed to realize that this had been her plan all along. She'd been attempting to isolate the warden and slowly take over the prison from the very start. It was a cunning plan, and it appeared that now it had worked. The employees were gone. Many of the members of management would follow them, and then it would be just her, the warden, and a prison full of ghosts. I implore you not to do this. This woman has ulterior motives. I don't know how you can't see it. She is planning something, and I have fear that she does not have your best interests in mind, or the interests of this prison. Who will defend the prison if this enemy of yours in the forest decides to come pay a visit? Will the ghosts fight for you? Will anyone fight for you? I'm not asking if your employee... Bleh. As your employee, I'm asking as your friend, please reconsider this. The warden raised an eyebrow as he looked at Strauss, clearly not liking the line of questioning. If you intend to leave as well, then why don't you go ahead and do it? There's no room for second guessers here. If you're not on board with our new change, then I'd suggest you go elsewhere. Strauss stared at him for a moment, waiting for him to take it back. But as the silence stretched on, he nodded and walked from the room. He paused at the door, looking back at the warden with pity as he delivered his final words on the matter. This is a mistake, and I hope it's one that you live to regret. Then he left, and the warden was indeed left all alone with his ghosts and his choices. Alrighty. A longer Stragview story tonight. Get a little air going in here. Whew. Hopefully. Hopefully we're done with all the static noises. Alrighty, if you're just joining us, we have plowed through 3 stories, and getting ready to do our Tuesday-Thursday stories, which are the next part of our Memories by Mail stories. Oh, thanks, new subscribers. Welcome, welcome. Let's see. I think we're on part 3 and 4 of these. Well, I'm about to go through some of these and clean them up a little bit. Alright, there's that one. And then I've got part 3 over here. So... yeah. For those of you who have not listened to our Memories by Mail series, we did part 1 and part 2 last week, where a brother and sister are staying in their childhood home after their mother dies, and they're discussing some weird tapes they used to get in the mail about shows that never quite aired. It's kind of a Nielsen box situation. They were basically testing out shows that may or may not air. It looks like it's going to be a 6-parter. So we're reading part 3 and part 4 tonight. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Alrighty. Alright. The 2 of us stood at the bottom of the hole downstairs that would take us to the attic, daring the other to go up and look for the box. The attic was always somewhere we had avoided when we were kids. Nobody really wanted to go up there, and Mom seemed to be the only one who would venture up there when we needed to find something. It was a pretty big attic, considering that it was the size of the entire house. It hung above the loft that my sister and I had slept in, and sometimes late at night you could hear things up there. I always thought it might be rats or raccoons, but the longer I lay in bed and listened to them skitter up there, the less I believed it. You could only sit up here for so long and listen to them scratch around before you began hearing monsters or demons, and you knew they were waiting for you to fall asleep so they could get you. I had avoided going up in the attic unless it was absolutely necessary, but in this case it seemed like it might be. Mom had stored a lot of our old stuff up there, and if we were going to find more VHS tapes, then it would probably be there. "Come on," my sister said, as she gave me a little push. "Don't be a baby. That's rich coming from you. I don't see you in any hurry to go up into the attic either." "Well, we'll never know what's up there unless we go," she pointed out. "I guess we'll have to go together," I said, as I headed up the stairs and into the dark space. The attic was exactly the way I remembered it. It was dark, the light from my phone barely illuminating the surface. It was musty as well, not much light coming in to knock away the cobwebs or the dust bunnies that had taken over the place. I doubted that anyone had been up here since Mom died, and it was all just kind of all over the place. There were mounds and mounds of boxes, all of it sitting helter-skelter around the area. Mom probably hadn't done a lot of organizing up here, so it was just all piled around with very little thought given to placement or organization. My sister and I spread out, wanting to cover more ground, and it didn't take me long to find a box full of videos. They weren't hard to find. One of the cases gleamed at me from the top, and I could already see several old cartoons sitting inside, just waiting to be discovered. "Found some more," my sister called, and I grabbed up my own box and headed for the stairs. What a coincidence I seemed to have, but then something screamed and burst out of the box. I nearly dropped it. Something screamed like a banshee and leapt at me, causing me to bat it away as the box wobbled in my hand. I was panicking as I started to turn, but when I saw what it was, I laughed at my own silliness. The rat had probably been living in that box for a long time, and he really didn't seem to appreciate us messing with his house. He hissed at me as he ran away, streaking deeper into the attic before disappearing completely. "Are you okay?" my sister asked, coming over and hearing... coming over after hearing the loud noise. "I guess," I said, "but I guess we gotta call an exterminator and get rid of these rats." She laughed and held up another box gingerly, as though afraid more rats might be ready to come out. "You can pay for the exterminator out of your part. I think mine might be a little bit preoccupied." We took the boxes downstairs, and luckily, they didn't have any more rats in them. Some of the cartoons had been a little chewed, but most of them were in good shape. I was surprised that none of them had fallen victim to the usual problems of storage. I didn't hear any mouse poop rattling around in them, and I didn't see any spools that looked chewed on. Just normal dirty cassette tapes, sitting in a box and waiting to be discovered. We dug through more recorded cartoons, old VHS tapes, and plenty of other stuff that I had never seen before. It was weird to not recognize some of the boxes that I'd seen all my life, but I guess that's what happens when you go away for a little while. As we sorted through, we finally came across what we were looking for. We found Holly's Hobbies in my box, and Castor's Creek in hers. Castor's Creek was another show that I remembered pretty fondly. My sister hadn't really been interested in it since it was more for older kids, but I'd watched quite a few episodes, and I liked it a lot. I was old enough to understand the relationships and the other things that had happened during the episodes, and it had made me feel like an adult to watch the show. I wondered if it would be like Roto Robots as I looked at the case, full of things I didn't remember and couldn't explain. I hoped it wouldn't, because I had a lot of fond memories where this show was concerned. "Which should we watch first?" she asked. "Let's watch Holly's Hobbies first. I don't remember a lot about that one, and it might be nice to see it again. Ugh. Holly's Hobbies was a kids' craft show that had an element of storytelling within it. Holly was the main character, and seemed to be the only character on the show at all. Usually shows like that had puppets or other people, but the show had Holly moving between these bland sets with colorfully lit panels in the background as she worked on the day's craft. The only other thing in the scenes were these gray card tables with craft supplies standing on them. It was a little weird, and even as a kid, I thought the sets and the setup were kind of strange. As the tape went in at the static... Blech. The allergies are killing me today. Let's see. As the tape went in and the static began to diminish, I remembered something about the show. My sister had liked it, but it had always faded. It had always made me feel kind of scared and anxious when I watched it. I couldn't have said why, but I knew what the feelings were. As the theme song started and I saw Holly come bouncing onto the set, I was suddenly reminded why. Holly's Hobbies. Holly's Hobbies, Episode 1, Mom's Birthday. The first episode was pretty bland as far as pilots go. Holly came out onto the set and introduced herself, and waved at all the boys and girls out there in TV land. The sound of something hitting the floor was just out of camera, and Holly said it was time to check the mail. She went to another colorful backdrop and bent down as she picked up an envelope. It was from Holly's mother, and she was reminding Holly that they were going to have a birthday party later that day. Holly acted surprised. She couldn't believe that she had forgotten it was her mother's birthday, and told the boys and girls that they needed to make her a present. What followed were 3 different crafts. One was a birthday card, one was paper flowers, and one was a colorful envelope to put the card in. She ended the episode by waving goodbye and heading out to her mother's party. As a kid, I had thought it was nice that she had made a card, but as an adult, it wasn't the craft that I was paying attention to. Holly, the hostess, was trying her best to keep a smile on her face and keep her energy up, but it was strange how she would glance offset sometimes, or seem to forget her lines before looking over there, and then just picking them up again. Sometimes she looked afraid, and she would rub her arms, which was always covered by a sweater. To a kid, these would just seem quirky, but to me they seemed like Holly was afraid of someone who only she could see. Even her exit felt like she was glad to be gone and hoped that she wouldn't be asked to come back. Holly's Hobbies, Episode 2, Fall. Holly is still inside, but she bounds around as she talks about how she loves fall. She says the leaves change and get colder. It gets colder. It gets colder, and you get to wear comfy sweaters. We cut to a different area and see a pile of leaves, which Holly jumps into with a little whoop that turns into a yelp of pain. She stands up, rubbing her back, but makes herself smile through the pain. She says it's great that these leaves are here since they can use them to make a craft. She bends down and picks some of them up before taking them to the next area. Here, they draw trees and stick the leaves to them so that they can make them look like fall trees. I had to rewind it twice, something my little sister did not seem to like, but As she made the tree, you could hear someone talking to her just offset. It was hard to make out. They were talking pretty low, but it sounded like they were threatening Holly, and you could hear her make an odd sobbing sound a few times before it panned up to her smiling and holding up her picture. She then made a jack-o'-lantern with a pumpkin that was sitting on the other table. At one point, as she was carving the mouth. At one point, as she's carving the mouth, the knife slips and you can see her cut her hand. The camera doesn't stop, but Holly puts her hand to her mouth and hisses in pain. She looks at the camera and seems to beg whoever is filming to stop, but they must be telling her to go on because she continues to carve the pumpkin, despite the blood smearing it. She smiles at the finished product, her blood having been hastily wiped away from the jack-o'-lantern. But the smile is rigid as she explains that jack-o'-lanterns are part of Halloween. The last craft is a tissue paper ghost, and it's hard not to notice the blood that gets on this as well. Someone appears to have given her a napkin to press against the wound, but the cut is pretty obviously hurting her. She tells us that she hopes we have a wonderful fall and says goodbye as she holds up the paper. If I could talk. Try that one again. Alright. And says goodbye as she holds up the paper pumpkin in her wounded hand and waves. I didn't remember this episode from when I was a kid, but I remembered being I remembered being afraid to carve a jack-o'-lantern a couple of times when it was Halloween. I have to believe that this episode of Holly's Hobbies was the reason. Holly's Hobbies, Episode 3, Christmas. This episode was a pretty typical Christmas episode, but it definitely raised some red flags. Holly appears in a Santa outfit, but it's a little skimpy for a kids' show. She wasn't indecent, but it did allow us to see some of the bruises that were on her arms and her shoulders. The bruises were clearly finger marks, but Holly was all smiles and jolly attitude as she wished everyone a Merry Christmas and hoped that Santa brought them lots of toys. That episode's craft was a tree made out of toilet paper rolls, a snowman made out of cotton balls and felt, and candy canes made out of paper, and colorful and colored with crayons. Holly didn't seem as nervous in this episode, and you can hear someone whispering to her again from off camera. I heard a couple of times what they were saying, and it was never anything good. At one point, they called her a stupid whore and a damn junkie, but she just kept smiling through the whole thing and making her craft. As the episode ended, she sang Up on the Housetop as the credits rolled, and you can hear the voice rising in anger before the episode cuts off. I started to ask, but my sister shushed me as the fourth and final episode started. Holly's Hobbies, Episode 4, Mourning. This was the fourth episode, and it was definitely the most uncomfortable. The show began with Holly holding a letter and sobbing openly. It wasn't fake crying either. She was really letting them fall. And she cried and cried for nearly 5 minutes as the camera rolled. When she looked up at the camera, it was in disbelief. She kept looking around like she couldn't believe whoever was filming. This was actually... Let's try that again. They've made some weird choices here. It was in disbelief. She kept looking around like she couldn't believe whoever was filming. Okay. She kept looking around in disbelief, as if she couldn't believe whoever was filming this was going to make her do this. But when the camera showed no sign of stopping, she finally wiped her face and told the kids in TV land that her mother had passed away. Holly couldn't believe it. She had just been at her mother's birthday party, but she supposed that everyone has to die sometimes. It made me sad as a kid, but it really hit me hard as I sat there in my childhood living room and watched this woman have a mental breakdown as the camera rolled. We'd lost our own mother, after all, and I could understand what she was going through. Holly went about her crafts listlessly, glancing off camera to see if she would be given a reprieve. It never came. She was forced to make a remembrance book for her mother. The book took longer than most of the crafts usually did, because Holly had to stop and cry quite a lot. She assembled pictures of a woman who looked a lot like her into the pages of a picture album, and when she closed it, there was quite a bit more crying before she got up from the table and went to the next area. Next, she made a bouquet of flowers that she was going to leave for her mother. But there was something else going on off camera. Sometimes her hand would put flowers down so that she could work on something else, and I hadn't been able to see it until just before she picked up the flowers. She was winding pieces of rope together, and I didn't want to know what her plans were for those or what she was making. Instead of a third craft, she shuffled into frame of a third area and just stood there as she faced the wall. She had the flowers in one hand, but in the other, she had a length of rope, as if contemplating what she meant to do with it. Hi, Susie. We're glad you could make it. There was shouting off camera as What? Okay, let's see what they were doing. There was shouting off camera as the paper flowers she had made hit the ground, and it cut off abruptly as the credits rolled over a dark screen. I hadn't liked the episode as a kid. It made me realize that my own mother would one day die, but neither of us had been able to say that any of the episodes were bad. They'd made me feel bad, but none of them had been poorly put together or been on. Hey, Lou. Yeah. Last time I text a type and don't check them over before I read them. Some of these are a little rough. Or been unentertaining to watch. Yeah. Or been unentertaining to watch. As the snow came down on the television screen, I looked at my sister and saw her reach for the next day. The next tape. No, next day. Nice. I need a shave too, bro. I looked at my sister and saw her reach for the next tape. I put a hand over hers, stopping her. She turned to look at me, and her smile was so wide that I thought she might bite me. "Why do you want to watch these?" I asked, voicing the question I should have from the start. For a moment, all she did was smile in the face of my confusion. Well, that's part 3. We're going to go ahead and move on to part 4, I reckon. That'll be our last one for the night if you guys are just joining us. Oof. There have been some long ones tonight. Goodness. Oh, no. No more Twitter for you, Lou. Don't feel too bad. I'm sure it's probably for the best. That guy's platform is a hellscape sometimes. Alright, so we are going to move right on into part 4, which is where we're going to hear about Castor's Creek. So that should be fun. Alright. Part 4 of Memories by Mail. Why do you want to see these old tapes so badly? My sister said nothing, just continued to look at the screen as the snow pattered behind the glass. You said that their value is in just owning them, so why do you need to watch them? It was a question I should have asked before now, but I seemed to be afraid of the answer. Truth be told, I wasn't really sure I wanted to know. My mind needed to know, though, so I had asked. I don't think she was going to answer me for a minute. I thought she was just going to pop in the next tape and continue her marathon, but what she said really struck with me. What she said really stuck with me. It's stuck with me ever since that night. I feel the same way about them that you do, but the apprehension and disgust I feel are nostalgic. I didn't understand these stories when I was a kid. How could I? We were poor, but you and I grew up free of strife or any of the abuse that some of the people in these shows seem to have experienced. In a way, I suppose we were lucky. In a way, though, it didn't really prepare me for what was to come. My life has been so much less stable than it was when I was a child, and I think I resent now that we didn't have a little bit of upheaval when we were kids. It might have made me capable of handling what I'm going through now. These tapes, though, they make me feel the way I did when I was a little girl. They take me back to a time before all these terrible things happened, and they remind me that there were better times and easier ways when the only apprehension was felt as we watched these tapes. It was the saddest thing I'd ever heard, and I didn't really know how to take it. Thinking about it, I knew she was right. We had never really had any reason to feel slighted or put upon when we were kids. We lived very comfortably, if not poorly. We never wanted for food or shelter. We were happy with just a few VHS tapes and a TV to watch them on. And I nodded as she took the next tape out of the box and set it up. It was Castor's Creek, a story I was very familiar with since it had been one of my favorites. Castor's Creek was about 5 Maine kids who lived in a small town and had small town problems. The main character, so much as they had one, was named Peter, and he was a jock character. He was usually the focus of the show as well, but not always. His girlfriend Maggie was a cheerleader, and her best friend Sylvia was her constant companion. It was made pretty clear that Sylvia had a crush on Peter, and it's sometimes a point of contention between the two. Peter had 2 friends, Marcus and Bobby. Bobby is also kind of a jock, but he's more of a funny guy as well, who's always cracking jokes and trying to make people laugh. Marcus is a big guy who mostly seems to be into fixing up his truck. The other character's name is Kyle. He's kind of a typical bad boy. He's always fussing with his hair or working on his motorcycle, and sometimes he acts as a love interest for the 2 girl characters. The character models were pretty standard for the time, but I remember looking forward to watching the show again because it seemed so real to me. It was live action, so of course it was real people, but the situations and the problems always seemed like things I could relate to, despite the fact that I have no frame of reference for these kids and their schoolyard problems. My own high school was small, having about 500 people in it, and most of us had known each other long enough that we didn't really have any sort of drama surrounding people other than the usual girlfriend-boyfriend thing. As the tape started and the theme song played, I remembered how the first episode went, and it gave me a little nostalgia that my... Okay. Well, Cindy, if you go to bed, we sure are glad you made it. I remembered how the first episode went, and it gave... Yeah, it's been a long one tonight. And it gave me a little of that nostalgia that my sister had been talking about. The first episode started with a moving shot of the creek, a place where most of the stories seemed to take place. It wasn't a huge creek, maybe 12 feet across and just deep enough to go in up to your waist, but it was their creek, and they used it quite often as a backdrop for stories and informational dumps. The show showed very little, usually opting to tell the viewers what they needed to know. The opening speech always left me a little misty-eyed, though I couldn't say why. Nobody knows why they call it Castor's Creek. Some people think Castor was the founder of the town, but there's never been any records to show one way or another if this is true. Some people think that Castor was a town hero, maybe a soldier who fought in a war, or who defended the town from one of the Indian tribes when they first settled here. There's no evidence of that either, but people still talk about it often. Others think it's just the guy who used to own the land, whose identity has been lost to time. Whatever the reason, the creek has a lot of meaning to me and my friends. The creek is like the lifeblood of this town, and it ebbs and flows, it rises and falls, and if we're lucky, it comes back the next year so that we can experience it all over again. Castor's Creek, Episode 1, Castor's Creek. The first episode starts with that monologue that I just read to you, and we see Peter sitting by a tree as he writes something in his notebook. I think, given what happens later in the episode, he might be working on a school paper, but it's never really made clear. Somebody calls his name, and Peter looks up as we're introduced to Bobby. Bobby comes up and tells him that Maggie is looking for him, and that she probably wants to invite him to the Sadie Hawkins dance. Peter sighs and says that he hasn't seen her, but he's sure that she'll find him eventually. As he starts walking away, Bobby asks if Peter wants to invite him. Bleh. As he starts walking away, Bobby asks him if he wants her to invite him to the Sadie Hawkins dance, and Peter says he isn't really sure. He supposes that would be fine, but we get the feeling that Peter wants someone else to invite him to the dance. Bobby says he's going to ask Jenny Miller to ask him to the dance, and Peter asks if that defeats the purpose of the Sadie Hawkins dance if you ask the girl to ask you. Bobby shrugs and says he doesn't know or care. He just doesn't want to be the only guy not invited. Bobby says he really doesn't care one way or another, and that he's sure that Jenny will say yes if he asks. The two make some small talk as they walk towards Peter's house, typical friend banter, and as we get to Bobby's house, they say their goodbyes, and Peter leaves to walk the rest of the way by himself. We cut to the next day where Bobby Peter. Fix that before I lose it. All right. We cut to the next day where Peter is reading his report, which is the part we heard at the start of the episode. He thinks the class and his teacher He thanks the class. Not thinks. He thanks the class, and his teacher tells him it's lovely before taking his paper and giving him an A. The bell rings then, and we see Peter leaving his English class. Maggie stops him in the hall and asks him if he wants to go to the Sadie Hawkins dance with her. Peter tells her he'll go, and she accuses him of not being very excited about it. He says it's just another dance, so what's there to get excited about? She starts to cry a little and tells him that he could at least act like he likes her. Peter says he does like her, that he probably even loves her, but that he's just not into dances, at least not as much as she is. She leaves, not mad, but not really happy with the answer, and Peter bumps into Selena as he heads to his next class. She asks if Maggie asked him to the dance, and he said she did. She mirrors Maggie's response by telling him that he doesn't sound very excited about it, and he reiterates his answer by saying he's just not that into dances. Selena asks if he would have gone if she had asked him, and Peter says he supposed he never really thought about it. Selena asks if he would go with her instead, and Peter says he doesn't want to cause drama. Selena leaves in much the same way that can't talk tonight. Selena leaves in much the same way that God dang it. Selena leaves in much the same way that Maggie did, and Peter heads off to his next class. We cut to a little bit later as Bobby and Peter are walking home, talking about their day. Bobby says he asked Jenny if she would ask him to the dance, and she agreed, but Peter seems to be having a hard time getting excited about much of anything. The episode ends with Maggie calling to apologize for being a wet blanket, and telling him that she'll see him tomorrow. Peter heads off to bed, and the episode ends. For a first episode, it was pretty okay. There were 8 episodes of Castor's Creek, but I won't go into all of them. Most of them would bore you to tears. The show was sort of like Degrassi or any other number of teenage shows full of angst and drama at the time. It was the thing I noticed on the second watch through that caught my attention. There were a couple of different times when you could see missing posters hanging up in the town where the show was shot, and they would be the posters of the kids that were on the show. Not only that, but there were a lot of background characters too. There weren't a lot of background characters too. Not only that, but there weren't a lot of background characters either. Hey, Bev, we're glad you could make it. We're on the last one, but it's a doozy, so we've probably got a bit to go. The show seemed to recycle extras, which is pretty regular, and you could see the same people in the background of most shots. It was like they hadn't bothered to use the people that lived in the town for the show, and it seemed a little weird. Castor's Creek, episode 2 and 3, Thinking of Him and Loyalty. I'm going to mix these two episodes because they're kind of interchangeable. Both of them involve Maggie talking to Celine about the upcoming dance and her problems with Peter. There's a B plot about football practice and math assignments, but most of it wraps around the two female characters as Maggie tries to figure out whether Peter really likes her or not. It fleshes out a subplot where Selena is clearly interested in Peter, but she's torn between her loyalty to her friend and her desire to date someone she likes. At the end of the second episode, she decides to stay loyal to Maggie, but the tension builds as the story unfolds. Yeah, Luke, this one's Memories by Mail. It's the VHS one. Yeah, Bev, that's been happening a lot. Not just to mine either. Like, I've been getting. I watch a couple of lives sometimes, and every now and again I'll get one, and the live's either over or it's most of the way over. Well, that is the good thing about being on the Discord, is I usually post in Discord if I'm about to go live. I usually post in the community tab too, but apparently that's not working so well. Caster's Creek, Episode 4, The Big Game. This one sits around the big game between Massillon High School and their football rivals at Gwendolyn Prep. Peter, Bobby, and Mark are excited for the big game, and the cheerleaders are working hard on their routine. Peter is still kind of torn about whether or not to stay with his girlfriend, but he puts his effort into training and tries not to think about it. Selena starts dating Marcus, another member of the football team, who's friends with Peter, but doesn't really feel like he's being true to herself. The game goes well, and they win against their rivals, but the problem with the background characters seems to be even worse here. They cut back to the same 2 or 3 shots of the cheering crowd, and it's very obviously recycled. A lot of the kids on the opposing football team are also kids we've seen at the school or, just hanging around. I don't know why it caught my eye so much, but you would have thought if the show was going to be as popular as they clearly believed it would, they would have splurged on some new faces. The characters walk off smiling at the end of the game, and this is when we get our first look at Kyle. He's sitting on his bike in the parking lot, and when he winks at Maggie, it seems to be the first time we see her interact with any sort of attention to a character other than Peter. The episode ends with the two of them noticing each other, and then we transition into Episode 5. Caster's Creek, Episode 5, The Sadie Hawkins Dance. This was when the Sadie Hawkins dance comes into play. I think at one point they had meant for it to be a homecoming dance, but maybe they decided this would be better for some reason. It's pretty easy. Like it's just kind of a chat space, honestly. All the kids get dressed up for the dance and arrive with their dates and head off in a limo for some reason, probably so all of them could be in the same spot. They're talking animatedly, all of them excited about the dance, except for Peter. Peter is still moody, and we see him casting glowers at Selena as she sits next to Marcus. She looks back at him as well, and the two of them are clearly sharing a moment. But it's cut short when Maggie notices and calls attention to her dress and how pretty it is. They get to the dance and are having fun for a while, Maggie and Peter dancing together. Bobby and Jenny dance together, and Celine and Marcus sit on the bleachers and talk. As they're dancing, Maggie catches sight of Kyle, who is watching her from the door of the gymnasium. He smiles at her, and he moves outside, and Peter says he's going to go talk to some of the other football guys as their dance comes to an end. Maggie says she's going to go get some air, and then she goes outside. We finally get to speak with Kyle. She finally gets to speak with Kyle. Instead of talking with the football guys, though, we see Peter go over to Marcus and Celine and talk with them for a bit. Marcus goes to the bathroom, and Celine and Peter talk a little bit more about what she said the other day. They discuss their feelings somewhat and decide to have a dance. Meanwhile, Kyle and Maggie are talking to each other, and we get introduced to him properly for the first time. He tells Maggie that he's from the rival high school, Gwendolyn Prep, and he had hoped that she would be here because he wanted to find out more about her. This leads to them talking outside for a little bit before she invites him in to have a dance. When Peter sees this, despite the fact that he's dancing with her best friend, he gets mad and starts what? I think it's supposed to be threatening. Hey, Pegalicious. Glad you could make it. Anyway. He gets mad and starts threatening Kyle. The two of them decide the dance isn't the best place to have a fight, and decide an idea that's helped along by the chaperones, and they opt to do this later. The episode ends with Maggie holding Peter back and some of the other guys holding Kyle back. It's a little chaotic, but it's one of the last really normal episodes we get from the show. Caster's Creek, Episode 5, The Fight. The title of the episode seems to have nothing to do with what the episode is actually about. The fight was clearly supposed to be Kyle and Peter having their altercation, but it doesn't seem to be what we got. Instead, it's 25 minutes of grainy black and white shots of the main characters as they walk around the set and just seem to be between shots. We get Maggie and Celine talking about how the director has been running them ragged. Maggie says the shooting schedules are brutal, and she hopes it won't last much longer before they get what they need. Celine says she hasn't slept more than about 3 hours since they started shooting, and she's getting ragged. Both of them agree that the Sadie Hawkins dance, the episode before this one, was probably the worst of it, and they had more takes than any shoot they'd ever been to before. Whoever is running the camera clearly doesn't want to be seen, and it must be pretty small because when Selena turns, they duck into a doorway and the footage stops. We begin again with Bobby talking on an ancient cell phone. He's yelling at someone about how this union... This is a union violation, and how they're supposed to be there for him, not these cocksucking Hollywood types. He says that they haven't had a day off in nearly a week, and the recording schedule's a real killer. He says he hasn't even gotten to talk to his parents in close to a month, and he thought they could do anything about this. And if he... Hey, El DeGusto. And if he thought they could do anything about this, he would have called them instead of his manager. He's also glancing around like he thinks someone might be watching him, and whoever's on the phone with him is probably assuring him that this is just how the business is. He's doing a lot of nodding, a lot of humming, and then finally tells them to figure something out because he can't keep this up forever. Then he hangs up and walks away in a huff. Then we get another segment of Peter talking with a bald guy who must either be the scriptwriter or the director. He doesn't seem to be very happy with what he's reading, and the man looks to be trying to assure him that it's just how things are. Peter tells him that he's done shows like this before, and he knows how things are supposed to be, and this isn't it. He says they may be kids, but they still have rights, and he's not going to sit here and let this guy kill him for what may or may not be a hit show. The longer I watched all of this, the longer I believed that this wasn't meant for anybody to see. It clearly wasn't the episode they had in mind, and it was probably someone's attempt at blackmail. Whatever it is, that Peter knows or doesn't know, the man he's talking to finally has enough of being talked to in that way. He begins yelling at Peter and telling him that he doesn't call the shots around here, and that he's just better be glad that he has a job at all. He says that he's the director, and if he says that's how it goes, then that's how it goes. And if Peter wants to continue to work in this industry, then he needs to figure that out. Peter looks kind of scared, and as he finally puts his hands up and walks away, the man nods and goes back to whatever he was doing. There's a grainy shot, last in line, but there's no sound. It's definitely all the kids standing together and talking quietly. Whatever they're talking about, they're clearly not wanting anyone to know about it. The scene cuts out halfway through as we see Kyle standing over Peter and asking if he's had enough. The episode seems to start back up as it was supposed to, and ends as Peter tells him that this isn't over. They're back in their normal attire, and it's pretty clear that this was supposed to be during the Sadie Hawkins dance. Peter tells Maggie to come on, and she leaves with him, but she looks back at Kyle as he lights a cigarette and leans against his motorcycle. That's how the episode ends, but it was an episode that gave us a little more to think about than they intended. I need another. That we are. Oof. Coming to the tail end, guys, so I know it's been a long stream. Caster's Creek, episode 6 and 7, The Aftermath, and The Kindling. I'm going to put these two together as well because the particulars of the episode are less important than what you could see during the episode. They all revolve around what Kyle was thinking about after the fight and what Peter was going to do after the battle. There was a lot of brooding and a lot of strained back and forth between the female leads and the two male leads. But after the last video, I found myself watching the actors a little more closely. I had worked some long hours before, and I knew what exhaustion looked like. These kids looked like they were on their last legs, and a lot of them were delivering lines with less than their usual enthusiasm. Peter was supposed to be melancholy, but he came off as more bored than anything. Kyle didn't seem as tired as the rest of them, but he hadn't really been there for quite as long either, so that made sense. All the actors had deep bags under their eyes, and they all looked like they were just trying to get through the day so that they could lay down for a little while. Peter looked to be sporting a black eye, which made sense after the fight, but it looked a little better than stage makeup. It made me think that someone might actually be racking this kid over, and I had to rewind to be sure, but I was almost certain that it had appeared in the middle of the episode. Whatever the case, Peter finally decided to tell Celine how he felt, and the two of them began talking about what they were going to do about Maggie and Marcus. Maggie also met with Kyle, and they tried to figure out what they were going to do about their burgeoning romance. They end up sharing a kiss and finish out the episode talking about what they were going to do about Peter. That brought us into episode 8, the finale, whether it was supposed to be or not. I've watched these episodes hundreds of times, but when I was younger, I always skipped over episode 8 and episode 5. They didn't really make a lot of sense, and they didn't seem to go along with the story at all. Now that I was older, It made a lot more sense why they didn't, and I watched episode 8 with new eyes. Castor's Creek, episode 8, The Creek Bed. The episode begins with Peter and Maggie sitting by the creek. Peter is clearly asking her to come and meet her here. Ugh. Losing my voice. Peter has clearly asked her to come and meet him here, though it doesn't appear that she understands why. They're talking about their relationship, about what they should do, and it's pretty clear that the actors are tired. Peter keeps rubbing his eyes, wanting to go home so he can sleep, and his lines are barely understandable as he mumbles them. He's breaking up with her, that much is obvious, but he doesn't seem to know how to go about it, and finally, he tells the director that he needs a break. He just breaks character right in the middle of the scene and tells the director that he needs a minute to collect himself. Maggie looks fearful, but you can hear the director yelling at them off screen. He tells them to keep rolling. He tells them that they can take a break when he says they can take a break. Peter says he's had enough. He says that everyone's had enough, and they all just want to rest. The director says he doesn't care what everybody wants, and that they're going to keep doing it for as long as he says they're going to keep doing it. The camera suddenly falls to the side, and the same balding man from before steps forward and starts shoving Peter as he yells at him. He's calling him a brat, he's calling him a hack, and he's telling him he'll never work in showbiz again with this attitude. And when Peter falls into the creek, he towers over him and tells him he better keep going or he's going to drown him right here in that creek. The last shot is just Peter staring up at the man as Maggie cries, and everyone else mumbles quietly behind them. The scene ends without credits, and the tape just sort of cuts out. The two of us just sit there watching the screen, not really sure what to do. I guess, I said, as I listened to the tape rewind, there's only one more tape for us to watch, if we can find it. My sister nods, and luckily for you, as we were watching this one, I remembered where I put it. Whew. Okay, guys. That's it for tonight. Man, that's a 2.5 hour stream. We went pretty good. Oh, sorry it was a little choppy in parts. We definitely powered through those technical difficulties a couple of times. Oh, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the stream as much as I did. I always enjoy the stream. And thanks for hanging out with me while I recorded stuff and you guys listened to some cool stories. I will clean these up and you will get them next week for our usual uploads. Till then, catch you guys Tuesday. Dr. Plague, signing off. Oh, if you're just joining us, don't forget to check the community tab for the particulars on the Halloween writing contest. If you guys have got some cool Halloween stories you want to submit, go right ahead. Like it's going to be a big time. I've actually got to send Leah's book in a couple of days, so, I'd love to send you a signed book too. Whew. Thank you, guys. My voice starts to peter out after the third or fourth story, so it's always a slog after that, but I enjoy it a lot. I like reading stories to you guys and sharing cool stuff with you. Anyway, hopefully you guys will be there Tuesday when we do our hangout stream, and I will catch you next time. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening. Ooh.